Nintendo had a lot of big things to show within their E3 presentation. Breath of the Wild 2, Animal Crossing New Horizons, the fact that Animal Crossing New Horizons was delayed, which kinda sucks, but it's made up for with a big new Super Smash Bros. Fighter reveal. The heroes from Dragon Quest are finally being included in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate after much fan demand. I know everybody was so excited about them when they first were revealed in the direct. Wait. You're not excited about the hero. Okay, alright. Step aside, I'll talk about you next week. Banjo and Kazooie are being included in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and they got me very excited. Banjo and Kazooie are retro Nintendo characters originating on the Nintendo 64 and has been dormant for a long time in the eyes of Nintendo fans because they're owned by Rare, which is also owned by Microsoft, which means that it's pretty difficult to include Banjo on a Nintendo console in these modern times. But I don't know how they did it, but they did it. Nintendo worked with Rare and got Banjo and Kazooie to be included in the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and it's very exciting. In the gameplay trailer that they showed off at E3, you can see all the aspects about Banjo's moveset that you can analyze, but I'm not here to do that today. Today I want to talk about the real significance of Banjo's inclusion in Smash. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, I make new Nintendo videos every single week, Super Smash Bros., Mario, other stuff, so if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you do not miss any upcoming ones. And with that all being said, let's get started. The first significant aspect about Banjo and Kazooie's inclusion that I wanted to talk about today is that it represents the newfound great relationship between Nintendo and Microsoft. It was just a couple of years ago now when it seemed like Nintendo and Microsoft were effectively at each other's throats in a console war. Now, these console wars are nothing compared to the Nintendo and Sega Genesis wars in the 90s, but it's still a competition. Each company, Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony, wants to get more people to buy their console instead of their competitors. And even still today, Nintendo and Microsoft are still competing consoles on the market. However, the relationship has seemingly changed a lot. The Better Together slogan has been pushed by Microsoft and Nintendo for a while now, with both companies realizing that it's mutually beneficial to not be at each other's throats all the time. And Banjo and Kazooie's inclusion in the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate seems to have cemented this relationship even further, because as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Banjo and Kazooie are owned by Rare, which is owned by Microsoft. And having a character like this included in a Nintendo game is huge. Third-party characters being included in the roster of Super Smash Bros. Games is nothing new. We've had them included since Brawl now, with the first ones being Sonic and Snake. But this character is something special, because this is a character who's owned by a company who has a competing console on the market. It's like if Link were thrown into an Xbox game. It just seems crazy to think about, but it's actually happening. There were rumors before E3 that Xbox Live would be coming to the Switch, and we haven't heard anything officially about that, but who's to say that that won't happen, along with other crossovers between Nintendo and Microsoft, especially considering that they've worked together to include Banjo in the roster of Smash. Another significant aspect about Banjo and Kazooie's inclusion is that he has a significant history with Nintendo, having classic games on the Nintendo 64, which gives longtime Nintendo fans a lot of nostalgia. When doing DLC for a fighting game that people are going to have to pay for, you're going to want to release some of the most popular characters that fans are going to want to buy. Because after all, if you release characters that nobody's going to want to buy, you're not going to get sales and make money, which is ultimately the goal with DLC. And while Banjo may not resonate as well with some younger Nintendo fans who are relatively unfamiliar with the original Banjo and Kazooie games on the Nintendo 64, it does resonate really well with the many fans who did grow up with Banjo and Kazooie when it was popular on the N64 in the 90s. This section of fans, this legion of fans, will get very excited about Banjo, and then word spreads throughout social media and by word of mouth about the history of this character. People get interested, people start finding out about who Banjo and Kazooie really are, and then they may go out and buy Banjo and Kazooie themselves. Another interesting thing about this is that Banjo and Kazooie are the first third-party characters who were created in the West to be included in the roster of Super Smash Bros. This is really significant because it shows without a shadow of a doubt that Nintendo is really thinking about characters that'll resonate with fans outside of Japan. It kind of makes you think that they included the heroes from Dragon Quest as an appeal to people within Japan, and Banjo for the people who live outside of Japan. Despite this, I do still think there's a lot of Japanese gamers who are excited about the inclusion of Banjo and Kazooie in the roster of Super Smash Bros., and I'm sure there's still some that played it on the Nintendo 64. But ultimately, I think the majority of the sales for Banjo and Kazooie as a single fighter in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate are going to come from the people who grew up playing with the game, just because of their nostalgia from the character. Another significant aspect about Banjo and Kazooie's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is that it may possibly hint at a new Banjo and Kazooie game headed to a Nintendo console. Now this may seem like a stretch, but I do have some evidence here and I'm going to share it with you right now. The inclusions of third-party DLC characters in the past have led to future collaborations between Nintendo and the company that they're working with. A very recent example is how Persona 5 Scramble: The Phantom Strikers was revealed to be coming to the Switch after Nintendo had revealed that Joker would be coming. An earlier example would be Cloud's inclusion in Smash 4 as DLC, leading to further collaboration with Square Enix, bringing many Final Fantasy games to the Switch, as well as the timed exclusive Octopath Traveler. So who's to say that Nintendo isn't working with Rare to bring a new Banjo game to the Nintendo Switch in a similar way? If Microsoft wants to, they could have this Banjo game release on both the Xbox and the Switch. Get some deals done for revenue sharing in there, and that way you can make both sides happy. So in a way, this does tie into the first point that I was talking about within this video about a strengthened relationship between Nintendo and Microsoft because of this character's inclusion. This could very well be the case, and there's some additional evidence that has recently popped up on Amazon Germany. There was a listing for a Banjo and Kazooie game on the Nintendo Switch that popped up on Amazon shortly after E3. This may not mean anything, but this could be an accidental leak of things to come, and this collaboration may not be cemented with the inclusion of Banjo and Kazooie into Nintendo's premier fighting franchise, and instead may be cemented with Banjo and Kazooie's game series returning to Nintendo consoles. I'm so excited to play as Banjo in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate when he comes out this fall, and I'm sure you are as well. His moveset and the animations that they've created for him look really nice so far, and I can't wait to experience it when I play as him on my own. I also really like how the model for Banjo and Kazooie that they made for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate looks a hell of a lot better than the modern day models created by Microsoft for the character. This new Banjo and Kazooie artwork that Nintendo has published looks a lot more like fan art that people have created who love the original Banjo and Kazooie games for how the character could be interpreted in modern times. And that's something you've really got to appreciate about Nintendo, how they want to stick faithful to the original interpretation of the character on their console. They know that there's a lot of people who exclusively play Nintendo consoles and may not be as active in the communities of the other consoles that are out there. So for many, they haven't experienced Banjo and Kazooie until their last experience on a Nintendo console, and for some, they haven't experienced a Banjo and Kazooie game at all, and if Nintendo wants to reintroduce the character for the people who haven't really seen him yet, then making him designed in the most appealing way possible and the most faithful way possible to the original adaptation of the character is the best way to do it. Let me know in the comment section down below why you think Banjo and Kazooie were included in the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I have some videos recommended for you on the screen right now that I think you might enjoy. Stay tuned for more Super Smash Bros. Content coming really soon, and thank you so much for watching.